2018 has been a landmark year for spaceflight. Across the globe, launch activities have accelerated to levels beyond anything seen in recent decades. This year has witnessed a successful landing on Mars, science missions launched to explore the Sun and Mercury, 2 asteroid sample return missions reaching their targets, and a new exoplanet survey satellite placed into orbit, just to name a few highlights. But if there is one image that symbolises 2018 more than any other, it is this: Starman riding a Tesla far above the Earth, drifting through the darkness towards the orbit of the red planet. Because this is an image we can all relate to. By seeing an ordinary object out there in space, we imagine that we too, one day soon, will venture forth to explore the solar system. What's particularly remarkable is that this incredible feat was spearheaded not by a nation, but by a private company. And looking back at how far many such space companies have come in 2018, it's clear that visions of mass human spaceflight, a return to the moon, and even the settlement of Mars are on the cusp of being realised. So in today's Mars update, we're going to be looking into the major developments this year that have brought us one step closer to sending people to the red planet. We'll start with the achievements of SpaceX, the one company focused on Mars more than any other. We'll examine recent design changes to their next generation vehicle, Starship, and how this very system will enable the first group of space tourists to visit the moon in the years to come. And finally, we'll take a quick look at some exciting findings from NASA's new InSight lander, fresh from the surface of Mars. This year, over 100 orbital missions have successfully launched. And this is a big deal, as the last time this happened was way back in 1990. And in 2019, this record stands to be blown away, with 173 orbital missions planned. The growth this year has been driven by 2 key players. On the one hand, China has almost doubled their previous launch record, with almost 40 launches this year alone, mainly for Earth observation, navigation, and communication purposes. But the other key player, the private company SpaceX, have achieved in a few short years feats of engineering beyond anything seen elsewhere in the space industry. With their Falcon Rocket series, SpaceX have broken the world record this year for the most commercial rocket launches in a single year, setting the bar at 21. Their primary vehicle, the Falcon 9, is a partially reusable orbital rocket amongst the most capable and reliable in the world today. This year saw a new version of the Falcon 9 fly, known as Block 5, which is the world's first orbital rocket designed to be reflown at least 10 times with minimal refurbishment. Following the first successful launch and landing of a Block 5 in May, the same booster has been used on 2 further flights, one in August and one in December, with the booster recovered after each flight. The usage of a single first stage core for 3 separate launches within 7 months is a huge stride forward for reusable rocketry. It's quite remarkable that now, only 3 years after SpaceX first successfully landed a first stage core, over half of their launches this year used boosters that had already gone into space, and though one of their landings didn't go quite according to plan this month, the fact that they had a streak of 26 successful landings beforehand since June 2016 goes to show that we are now firmly in the era of reusable rocketry. In fact, the reusable launch system offered by the Falcon 9 has recently been certified as a so-called Category 3 launch vehicle, meaning it is now seen as reliable enough to launch NASA's most expensive and complex scientific missions, on par in importance with the Hubble Space Telescope. The Falcon 9 is no longer the only game in town though. In February, SpaceX launched the long-awaited Falcon Heavy for the first time, the most powerful operational rocket in the world today, resulting in inspiring images that will doubtlessly go down in the history books. If you want to relive the excitement of this incredible launch, or hear about the technical aspects of the Falcon Heavy, you can find those in my January and March Mars mission updates earlier this year, though we only saw the Falcon Heavy launch once this year. The first half of 2019 will see 2 launches of this new vehicle. In March, the first Falcon Heavy, utilising 3 Block 5 cores, will carry the Arabsat 6A mission into orbit, with all 3 boosters returning for reuse. And if they do indeed recover all 3, then just 1 month later, in April, they will be used again for the Space Test Program 2 mission on the 3rd flight of a Falcon Heavy. And as exciting as the launch of these super heavy rockets are, they are only the tip of the iceberg for what SpaceX have planned in 2019. SpaceX have been developing a crew capsule called Dragon 2, or Crew Dragon, for many years by this point, but now they are only weeks away from the first flight. The Dragon 2 capsule for this pioneering flight, called Demo Mission 1, has now completed integration and pre-flight preparations, ready for its launch to the International Space Station, currently targeted for January 17th. Whilst this first test flight won't carry any crew itself, it will prove the Dragon 2's performance and safety in the space environment, facilitating the first crewed flight some 6 months later in July 2019. During this second mission, called Demo Mission 2, NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken will embark on a 14-day mission to the International Space Station, becoming the first people to ride on a SpaceX rocket. But before the first flight with astronauts, SpaceX will push their system to the limit by deliberately aborting a Falcon 9 launch with a Dragon 2 on top in mid-flight. This in-flight abort test, currently scheduled for May 2019, is designed to demonstrate the ability of the Dragon 2 to escape safely from a malfunctioning rocket and bring the crew back to Earth. This mission, which will use the exact same Dragon 2 capsule recovered after the Demo Mission 1 in January, will start in many ways like a standard Falcon 9 launch, but about 90 seconds into the flight, at the point of max Q, when the rocket is under the greatest aerodynamical pressure, the Falcon 9 will shut down its engines, triggering the Dragon 2 capsule to fire its Super Draco thrusters to escape. Once the Dragon 2 has detached, the Falcon 9 will become unstable and rapidly break apart. The Dragon capsule will then coast, jettison its trunk, deploy drogue chutes at 10 km altitude and parachutes at 1.5 km altitude, before splashing down into the Atlantic Ocean. A recovery vessel will then head out between 14 to 68 kilometers to recover the Dragon capsule. If you're looking for more details about the in-flight abort test, the Federal Aviation Authority recently released a detailed report outlining the profile of this mission, which I'll link to down in the description. So while these activities are certainly very visible, SpaceX actually have another project flying a little under the radar this year, which holds the potential to fundamentally transform our lives right here on the Earth. Allow me to introduce you to Starlink. This will be a constellation of nearly 12,000 satellites, designed to offer global broadband internet coverage at speeds of 1 gigabit per second, 178 times faster than the current average internet speed. The current plan calls for over 7,500 satellites to orbit between 335 to 346 kilometers altitude, 1,500 satellites to orbit at 550 kilometers, and nearly 3,000 satellites to orbit between 1,110 to 1,325 kilometers. To give you a sense of the scale of this plan, the constellation would contain twice as many spacecraft as have been launched so far in human history. In February of this year, SpaceX deployed the first 2 experimental satellites to test the technologies powering Starlink. Then, in March and later in November, the US government Federal Communications Commission officially granted approval for the constellation in 2 batches. The first half to launch before November 2024 and the second before December 2027. If things go according to plan, then we could see the first dedicated launch around June 2019, with initial operations commencing as soon as 2020. So this project is definitely an area that we'll be hearing more about in the years to come. Now, as you might imagine, such a system will be extraordinarily expensive to create, with an estimated final cost of $10 billion US. But just this year alone, SpaceX have raised $1.3 billion, which actually values the company now at $10.5 billion. So they do seem on track to delivering on this project. As ambitious as it may be though, it pales in comparison to the ultimate goal of SpaceX, making humanity a multiplanetary species. SpaceX's CEO Elon Musk first outlined the design of a Mars transportation architecture in 2016, and has since refined and redeveloped the concept on many occasions. In fact, just this year we've had 2 major redesigns. The first concerning the structure of the rocket system proposed to take people and cargo to Mars, and the second regarding the materials that the rocket and associated hardware will be made of. So here I'm going to step you through the most recent design of SpaceX's Mars architecture, before updating you with the latest progress on construction of the first prototypes. This is Starship and Super Heavy, the central components of SpaceX's Mars ambitions. The combined system consists of a 66.9 metre booster called Super Heavy and a 55 metre upper stage called Starship, which together can transport 100 tons to low Earth orbit or even to the surface of the Moon and Mars using on-orbit refueling. The new design has 2 actuated or adjustable fins at the front, along with 2 actuated and 1 fixed fin at the rear. The actuated fins can dynamically adjust their orientation to oncoming flows in order to provide drag and control the pitch of Starship during atmospheric entry. The 3 rear fins additionally double up as landing legs. The 7 Raptor engines propelling Starship have also seen a notable change, with separate vacuum optimised and sea level optimised engines being swapped out in favour of a single sea level optimised engine in order to streamline production. Even given this, the Raptor will remain a highly efficient engine with a specific impulse of 330 seconds and a chamber pressure of 300 bar. You'll also notice a new aft cargo section, which will enable the deployment of supplies easily to the surface without having to rely on a crane, such as was true for the previous design. Now, the design I've just discussed, which was revealed in September 2018, has already seen some major changes. As far as I'm aware, the physical dimensions of Starship and Super Heavy remain unaltered, but the system will no longer be made of carbon fibre composites, as has been true for the last few years. Instead, it appears that the airframe and internal fuel tanks will be made out of an alloy of stainless steel. Now, it isn't currently clear what the full reasoning behind this decision is quite yet, but some of the speculation I've heard concerns it being far easier to join together multiple steel components compared to weaving together prefabricated carbon composite components. One major advantage of this material change, though, is that it has accelerated SpaceX's plans to build a nearly full-scale prototype of Starship for hop tests next year. In the last few weeks, a large tent structure has been erected at SpaceX's Boca Chica site in Texas, with various steel components of the hopper being rapidly assembled. Under the current timeline, the demo Starship, which will have the full 9 metre diameter, but be slightly shorter than the 55 metre planned for proper Starships, should be complete in January. It will then undergo a hop test shortly thereafter, with Elon Musk then planning a full technical presentation on the Starship and Super Heavy system in March or April of next year. I will of course keep you all updated on any design changes, of which I'm sure there'll be many, in future Mars mission updates. Following the initial hop test, the Starship prototype will begin a test program similar to the Grasshopper vertical takeoff and landing program that the Falcon 9 went through. This will start with low altitude tests, where Starship will hover for around 100 seconds at altitudes below 500 meters, with around 3 of these tests being held per week. These initial tests will then be followed by high altitude tests once per week, where Starship will ascend to 5 kilometers for around 6 minutes at a time. Now, the initial Hopper Starship that SpaceX are building at the moment will not be designed for full orbital spaceflight, for which a separate vehicle will be built at a later date. The plan then would be to conduct many separate uncrewed test flights of increasing complexity in 2020 and beyond. If all goes well with the Starship and Super Heavy test program, Elon Musk announced in September that the first lunar flight with private citizens on board will be attempted in 2023. This is part of the dearMoon project, whereby Japanese fashion innovator and art curator Yusaku Maezawa has paid for himself and 6 to 8 artists to accompany him on the first crewed Starship flight to the moon. The idea is for these artists, which could include a film director, painter, novelist, or photographer, to create a work of art upon their return to Earth to share the experience of space travel with the world. The 6-day mission will start with the passengers and any accompanying crew launching on Starship and Super Heavy. Following booster separation, Starship enters into a parking orbit while it prepares for a trans-lunar injection 38 minutes after launch. Starship then spends 2 days drifting towards the moon, where it will experience a 31-hour flyby. Around 15.5 hours into the flyby, the passengers will witness the Earth rising over the surface of the moon. They then spend another 2 days returning to Earth, using the Earth's atmosphere and Starship's thrusters to land. So why is the dearMoon project so important? Well, besides the fact that this mission is helping to fund development of Starship and Super Heavy, there's something far more important at stake here. Think back to February, when the entire world forgot about its problems for one moment and gazed in wonder at the image of Starman in the void of space. If that image could capture the world's attention for one moment, just imagine what would happen by sending a group of people not just into space, but to the moon. And by creating innovative ways to share the experience with the wider world, this will spread out the impact of the mission over time, keeping space in the minds of the public. And it is this newly induced excitement and passion for space travel, sustained over a period of time, that will open people's eyes to the possibilities of not just visiting space, but living there one day. And it is this very possibility that SpaceX are working to make a reality. For SpaceX designed Starship with the goal of opening a new frontier, the human settlement of Mars. Under current plans, they will launch uncrewed supply missions in 2022 to confirm water resources and place preliminary infrastructure, such as landing pads. This will be followed 2 years later in 2024 with the first crewed Mars mission. Over the following 4 years, they envision constructing a base on Mars around 2028, featuring propellant manufacturing, power stations, and domes for crops. This base would eventually grow over time to become the first city on another world. This may all sound like science fiction at first glance, but SpaceX are already engaging the wider community to solicit advice on realising this vision. For example, in August they held their first Mars workshop, inviting 60 scientists and engineers to discuss important issues such as life support systems and human health for a Mars settlement. And it's meetings like this that will become increasingly important as Starship and Super Heavy move closer to launch, as a wide pool of expertise will be required to successfully support a sustained human presence on the Red Planet. Before we end today, I just wanted to highlight some incredible results from NASA's InSight mission, which may be of particular interest to aspiring Martian colonists. After a spectacular launch in May, on November 26th, InSight became the 8th mission to successfully land on Mars. The main goal of the mission is to study the interior of Mars. It is now in the process of deploying its instruments and should begin full science operations in early February. So by this time next year, we should have some truly interesting results to discuss concerning what the interior of the Red Planet is truly like. Now, if you are interested in the science behind the mission, you can find that in my May 2018 Mars update, so I won't repeat that here. But actually, even before the instruments have been fully deployed, some results have already been coming in. In particular, both the pressure sensor and seismometer have detected the first sounds from Mars. Winds blowing across the lander at about 5 meters per second. So let's take a listen to the sounds of our future home. Now, I should mention that the recording you just heard isn't the raw footage, because the pressure raw recording is just below 10 Hz in frequency, slightly below human hearing, so it was increased by a factor of 100. But I just wanted to share that with you because there's something incredible about hearing sounds from another world. Well, that brings us to the end of this marathon of a Mars mission update. For those of you wondering why it took so long to put this update out, I'd like to apologise for the unusually long gap between the previous update and this one, especially to all of my long-term subscribers. The reason is because at the moment I'm nearing the end of my PhD here in Cambridge. I've been writing applications for research positions at universities all over the world since about September, which unfortunately scuppered my plans to put together a Mars mission update for you all in October. But in any case, those applications are out of the way now, and hopefully I should be hearing back around February time with a job offer if everything goes according to plan. So looking forward, I'm planning to put out at least 4 quarterly Mars mission updates in 2019, along with a few live streams, which should hopefully give me some time to write up this PhD thesis on exoplanet atmospheres I've been working on for the last 3 years. Now, if you do have any questions, or better yet, topic suggestions for future live streams, please do drop them down below, as I do read all of your comments, and I really value this community we've built together. I can't wait to see what 2019 has in store for spaceflight, and to share the story with all of you. I hope you all have a great holiday season, and I'll leave you with this beautiful image of Korolev crater, courtesy of the European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter. See you all in the new year. Thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed this final Mars mission update of 2018. If you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them down below, and to make sure that you don't miss any future Mars mission updates, hit subscribe and then click the notification bell to follow all of the latest news on our journey to the Red Planet.